Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm so excited for today's webinar on getting development operations to work for you instead of against you. My name is Jenna Notar-Francesco. I am an account executive here at CauseVox, and I am joined today by Kenny Sigler, who is a fundraising consultant, also a certified fundraising executive. So he has so much extensive experience in the development world. And he is here today to share some insights on, just the ins and outs of development operations and how you can use them to better serve your organization. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We have a good chunk of time. This is scheduled for an hour webinar. So I hope that you can, take a break from your workday for a minute, maybe pause, have a drink, have a little bit of something to eat, and just join us and enjoy. This webinar is being recorded, so you don't have to take extensive notes. We will be sending out all of the slides and resources that are mentioned, as well as a recording so that you can watch it later on demand and maybe share with your team. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we would love to hear from you. So we want to invite you to use our chat at the bottom of your screen to first chat us in and let us know who you are, your name, where you're from, and we will be using the chat throughout the webinar just to have some engagement there. So definitely keep that on hand. I don't know. It's spring over in New York. I'm in New York. Again, my name is Jenna. I'm an account executive at CauseVox, but I would love to hear from you all, where you're from, maybe what you're up to, something that you're looking forward to today's webinar, or something that you're hoping to get out of today, maybe a question you might have. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use our chat feature and type your questions in the chat. You can also use, just for your questions, we'll have a Q&A coming up at the bottom at the end of the time, so you can always use the Q&A panel. But we'll focus with the chat today. Hello, Terry from Georgia. Hello. Is it Kia from Washington? Hello, Amanda and Sandy in Baltimore, Maryland. Hello, hello. Jen in Boulder, Colorado. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Jenny from Texas. I think Kenny's in Texas, right? Awesome. Glendale's in New York City. Hello, fellow New York City-ite. New York City-er, I don't know. Working on some juicy grant proposals. Nice, Jen. That's gotta be fun. Wow, we got people from everywhere. Jen says she's hoping to gain some insight on how to build a stronger, better, more effective, happier development team at her organization. That sounds like an amazing hope, and I think we're going to definitely share some top tips today to help you achieve that. Hi, Regina Edwards, the EVP and CFO for Exponents Inc. in New York City. Okay, that's really awesome. Preparing for a gala on May 10th. That's exciting. Wow, we have so many amazing organizations here doing such great work. So I'm really excited to dive into today's webinar. Again, getting development operations to work for you instead of against you. Again, my name is Jenna Notar-Francesco. I'm an account executive at CauseVox, and I mainly work to get all of our organizations fundraising up and running quickly and effectively. And you'll hear a little bit more about CauseVox in just a moment. But again, I'm joined by Kenny Sigler, fundraising consultant and a certified fundraising executive. And I'm so excited for what he's going to be sharing soon. We'll just start with a little bit about CauseVox, just in case you're new. So we basically just make fundraising super simple for nonprofits who are getting up and running, or even growing nonprofits in general. We provide best-in-class online fundraising through donation forms and mobile payments, campaigns, ticketing, peer-to-peer. Basically, it's an all-in-one solution. We also provide hands-on support and onboarding for all of our users with real-life people So if you call in, you will get a human like me and not just a robot. So we're here to hold your hand through every step of the way. And we do provide top-rated fundraising education in the forms of guides, templates, webinars like today's, and other courses online. So basically, we will replace any outdated or clunky donation form software and replace it with a very new, modernized, streamlined two-step flow. It's a really nice, easy to use donation form, and that can be connected and integrated with your crowdfunding, event ticketing, and peer-to-peer campaigns, even capital campaigns. And I know Kenny does have extensive experience with capital campaign planning. So, all of these components, we help you facilitate all of your fundraising year round. Specifically with the donation form, again, we give your donors just an easier, more flexible way to donate. We offer a lot of mobile wallets, including Apple and Google Pay and PayPal, Venmo as well, even though it's not listed here, as well as ACH bank transfer. So those are our two most recent updates. You can collect one-time recurring donations and pledges for more flexibility, and especially great for those capital campaigns for your recurring donors. All of this is followed up with auto receipting, so you can customize that to tax deductible standards, and comes with a bunch of customizations and branding, so you can make it look and feel like your own. All of our forms, even ticketing forms, can be used to maximize all of your fundraising events, and all of our forms can be embedded directly onto your website. And this is all in connection with our hands-free peer-to-peer fundraising, which is sort of our bread and butter here at CauseVox outside of donation forms. We give really just the easiest way for people to sign up and fundraise on your behalf and have an easy platform through which to do it. Perfect for galas, whether it's an in-person event, a virtual event, a hybrid event, anything you can fundraise, anything you can think of, really, you can fundraise for it online. So spring is the second busiest fundraising season. I don't know if anybody's aware of that, but it's coming up. We're here. So I would encourage you, if you need a platform, if you're looking for a donation form or any type of fundraising tools, please feel free to reach out. You can book a demo on our Schedule a Demo page. And if you're interested in learning more about basically all of our tips and education that we provide, you can subscribe to our blog. We send free resources out every week, so you will want to definitely check that out. With that, I want to, give me a second here, turn everything over to Kenny. So Kenny has worked with nonprofits for over 10 years, and he's been a development director, an executive director, a senior fundraising consultant for a firm, and he now owns his own fundraising consultant business. So he's been helping nonprofits for so many years, and he also has a lot of capital campaign experience as one of his services. So I'm happy to introduce Kenny, and please give him some emojis and nice welcomes in the chat.
Thank you, Jenna, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining us today to talk about development operations. Something that I know for a fact is easily one of the most overlooked areas of fundraising. And so the fact that you're here, and like Jenna said, please feel free to engage in the chat. I'm glad to see that many of you are already doing so. And because I want some feedback from you guys, I'm going to ask some questions. And not only that, as we go through some of the material, if you have any tips or if you have experience, if there's something that you've done with your organization that you would like to share with the audience, please feel free to use the chat to do so. Otherwise, you're just going to hear from one person, and it's always better if we can have our collective thoughts and do this together. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to share my screen, so give me just a second. All right, so you should be seeing the title slide right now. And Jen, I'm realizing now as I'm looking at the title slides, I'm not seeing the chat, so there's probably an error on my end. So if you'll help me monitor the chat, that would be great. So as Jenna said, this is something that I'm passionate about because I've seen how development operations can, oh, I figured it out, there we go. So I've seen how development operations can help and hurt organizations as they try to raise money. But one thing that I want to start us off with is actually a fun piece of information, something that you may or may not know. Back in the 1960s, so we're talking 60 years ago, people were very concerned because of the technological and a lot of the innovation that was happening in the 60s. People were concerned that, or they theorized that the American work week would shrink down to 22 to 25 hours a week, and that the American work day or work week would shrink down to 3 to 4 days a week. Now, I think some people were wrong in that. Now, please feel free to use the chat box if you have found that to be true. Maybe you're the one organization that has found that with all this technology and with all this information that we know today, you're able to accomplish a lot more and in a lot less time. And your challenge is that you have so little to do and so much time to do it. But that was a real thing. The United States even had Senate committee hearings to discuss what we were going to do when we became so productive that we could get everything done in a fraction of the time. And they said that the United States would have a leisure problem. Americans would be free to go hiking, go to their favorite coffee shops and do all these leisure activities. And eventually we will get done with all of our leisure activities, that there will really be a problem. And I've not found that to be true. I've not come across any organizations where that's the case. And so we really are, with today, 60 years later, we have all this amazing technology, we have all of these resources, and we have all this knowledge. We have so much competing for our time and attention, but yet we feel busier and more hurried than ever before. One thing that we know is that with everything competing for our attention, one thing that's often neglected is ourselves. We know that for we know a lot more about the work-life balance. We know it's good for our mental health to take care of ourselves and to do that intentionally and set aside time for it. As fundraisers and as nonprofit leaders, we kind of fall into that same trap. There's so much to do. What's often neglected is ourselves. It's the internal components that allow us to operate efficiently and effectively. We tend to put that on the back burner. We do so much for so many people, and it's wonderful work that oftentimes it can lead to burnout, and we kind of get stuck when those aren't happening as they should. So let me give you sort of our agenda for today, and let me see what Sandy says. Demand increased, expectations increased. Maybe I will allow for more leisure. I don't know. I wouldn't count on artificial intelligence to be the solution in this case, but certainly I hope that it will be a tool in the future that will allow us to be more effective. But our agenda for today is to talk about 3 key areas in development operations. And when I'm doing a development audit for an organization, operations is one of the 6 key areas that we work on together. And within operations, I like to look at 3 things. I like to look at staff management or human resources, time management, and project data management. So those are the 3 areas that we're going to cover in the presentation. And as Jenna said, at the end of the presentation, we'll have time for questions and answers. So to get us started, I'd like to know what role you play within your organization. So in the chat box, would you type in what role you play within your organization? Am I talking to executive directors, development directors, or the head of fundraising staff? Maybe you're part of a fundraising team. Maybe we have some board members or volunteers in the room. I'm seeing development directors. Okay, I kind of figured this would be the case. We got a lot of development directors in the room. Fantastic. Development operations, great. A manager, okay. Chief development officer, fantastic. I'm seeing a lot of development, heads of development here. Coordinator. Development team includes me, a full-time executive director, part-time development coordinator. Good, awesome. So I see a lot of fundraising leaders in the room. This is great. So whatever role that you play within your organization, you're gonna find some helpful information here. And I realize most of us are fundraising leaders in the room. That's fantastic. So we've already covered this. We don't need to spend time. My name is Kenny. I have a consulting practice here in Texas. I've been in the business for over a decade. I've been a senior consultant for a firm. I've been a development director. I've raised money for a large institution, and now I have my own fundraising consulting business. One resource I'm going to give you right off the bat, and Jen is going to try to put the link in the chat so that you have it right there available, is something that a colleague of mine, Brian Saber, and his company Asking Matters developed. It's called the Asking Styles Quiz. So if you go to Asking Matters, if you go to the website, you'll see a link to take the fundraising or the Asking Style Quiz. And through his research, he's come up with 4 different fundraising or asking styles that you fit in. It is amazing. I see Jen. Jen is a rainmaker and a go-getter. It's fantastic. My point in showing you this is that it's a great resource, and I encourage everyone to take it themselves. And if you have a team, have your team take it. It will really help. It's kind of like all the different personalities and skills assessments, but it's specifically for fundraisers, and it's a great tool for you, for your development team, for your board members, your development committee to take. Personally, I'm a mission controller, and it kind of explains why I have an interest in operations, because mission controllers tend to be, as it says, detailed, thorough, methodical, responsible, and observant. We like to have the data. We like to evaluate before we say, let's go and take action on it. So I'm naturally interested in development operations. And one of the, a quote that's been gaining a lot of traction lately that I really love is from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you haven't read that book, it's a great book, especially for those of us that are operationally minded, but it's also applicable personally. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And I've seen so many organizations that have terrific fundraisers on their team, really dynamic, skilled, and talented people that aren't able to reach their full potential. They're not able to raise as much money as they possibly could reach their potential because a lot of those internal systems and processes hold them back. They get stuck in the minutia, and it's hard to find time to build relationships. And it really has a real life tangible impact on our work. So Atomic Habits, great read. This little nugget right here, you fall to the level of your systems, is 100% true. So let's talk about our first section, and that is managing development staff. And one thing that you can do right after this webinar that will make a huge difference with your organization is establishing a charter or a purpose statement for your development team. Even if it's a one-person development office, or if you have an entire team, does your organization have an articulated charter or purpose statement for development? We understand why it's important to have a purpose statement for our organization. It clearly articulates why your organization exists and what makes your organization and the mission special, what makes you unique. And the development office should have something very specific. It's a great building block to establish and build a culture of philanthropy within the organization. Having a clear charter or purpose is important because it should say something, and you can Google and research other and look at other organizations purpose statements for development, but it should really say something about the role that donors and philanthropy plays in the mission of your organization, and how the development office is a key pillar of your organization that builds relationships with those who invest in the mission and the organization who applies that mission out in the world. So when you have a clear charter or purpose for your development team, it does a number of things. It inspires not only the team, but other leaders within the organization to understand the role of development and the power of philanthropy. It galvanizes the development staff. It gets them to understand we're not just here to put on events. We're not just event planners, and we're not just the marketing team. We're not the mailing house of the organization. We have a bigger role that we play within the organization and the difference that we're making in the world. And it also helps from scope creep. Right? Part of your organization's purpose statement is so that you can make decisions as to what fits within the purpose of the organization, or what opportunities or activities might be just out of your purpose. So it helps guide decision making when you have a clear purpose or charter. So most organizations by far do not have a charter or purpose statement for their development office. And I would encourage everyone to make sure that you articulate that within your team and use that. I saw one of the responses, once a happier development team. This is a good tool to do that. Get them to participate in articulating the role that philanthropy plays within your organization and the purpose of the development office. Another thing I want to touch on is 10 years ago, I want to say 10 years ago in January, the underdeveloped report came out from Compass Point. Now, some of you may be familiar with that report. For those of you who are not, it is a free report available from Compass Point that talks about the revolving door of development directors and why so many. Jen, it's the underdeveloped report from Compass Point. It talks about why there's such a revolving door in fundraising, and all the contributing factors, and some really good data that supports these are the reasons why organizations struggle keeping fundraising staff, and here's what we can do about that. One data point in that report was 41% of development directors said that they did not have a strong relationship with their executive director. So I want us to thank you, Jennifer, for putting the link in the chat box. I want you to think about that for a second. 41% of development directors responded that they did not have a strong relationship with the executive director. That is a key, and that is a critical and essential relationship for fundraising success. And one of the reasons that that relationship isn't where it ought to be is because we don't do a good job hiring and managing our development directors. So I understand I'm talking to a lot of development directors today, and you may find yourself in this position. What often happens is an organization will hire a development director. They will give them the job description of a development director. They will hold them accountable for raising money for the organization. But in reality, development directors are asked to be the chief fundraising officer, the chief marketing officer, the volunteer coordinator, the chief strategy officer, the chief programmatic officer, the chief firefighter, and the cleanup crew. And the special event people were asked to wear all these different hats. In reality, when what we signed up for was to be the development director. And so a lot of times we have cases where the job descriptions and expectations don't align with the reality and what's expected in our daily lives. So my next question to the audience is, do you review your job description annually? I'd be curious to hear how many of you on here today actually make a habit of reviewing your job description. So Sydney reviews it quarterly. I think that's fantastic. Jen's working on an annual review now. It's part of our annual review. Yeah, so it's kind of mixed. We do that annually. That's a very important process. And as development directors, and I've done this before, I was in a situation once where I had a job description that in reality looked completely different from my day-to-day and what I was being asked to do. And to be honest, I didn't address that right away. I just thought, okay, I can make it work, and the job description is just a piece of paper that sits in a file somewhere. It's not really that important. We'll just do whatever we need to do to move the organization forward. And over time, that doesn't really work. You get increasingly frustrated, you hit roadblocks. And so it finally got to a point where I sat down with my boss and looked at my job description, and I asked her, could we please look at my job description and compare that to what really happens on a day-to-day and what the expectations are, so that we can work more effectively together. Either do you want me to do what's on the job description, or do we want to amend the job description to fit maybe some new priorities? And our organization had grown, and the fact was the job description didn't keep up with the organization growth that we had experienced. And that's where a lot of the tension was. A lot of the friction was the organization had grown, but we didn't keep up the job descriptions and expectations accordingly. And so once we started having that conversation, it opened my boss's eyes. Yes, Brianna, I believe the recording will be shared. And it really opened my boss's eyes. She really didn't understand or know what was going on under the surface, and that the job description and the goals had become so misaligned because we had grown so quickly. And my boss was busy putting out fires and dealing with the leadership of the institution. She was working with them. So it really was a great conversation to start. So as development directors, review your job description at least annually. I saw someone did quarterly. I think that's fantastic. And when you see that there are discrepancies between what your job description is and what you find in the reality, please share that with your boss. Have that candid conversation so that you can work on that together. And I can speak from experience, keeping that in a drawer and putting your job description aside thinking that it'll work out does not work out. That's not the best way to go about doing this. The last thing I want to talk about with managing development staff is whether you're the executive director, or maybe you're a development director and you have staff, and you probably have this in your own job description, is many of us have that other duties as assigned clause in our job description. And I understand why it's there, because we all want to be team players and we all want to chip in and help out any way that we can. And as a leader, when you're writing these job descriptions, you can't possibly anticipate everything that your staff is going to do. And so you want to have something in there that communicates, there are going to be some things that we don't anticipate that we'll need your assistance in. That's fine. What I've seen happen is a lot of times people will not be as clear and detailed in the job description because they know this clause is at the end, and they say, well, it's okay if we don't capture everything in the job description. It's okay if it's not quite as accurate. It's okay if it's not quite as detailed, because anything we missed in the body of the job description will just fall in the other duties as assigned category at the end of the job description. And so we use that as a crutch, and it hurts a lot of job descriptions. So I encourage leaders, if you have that in the job description, do not use that as a crutch. It's not an excuse not to be clear and detailed in the body of the job description. It's not what that's there for. So And as development people, we wear those hats willingly. I said earlier, we're the chief development officer, marketing officer, event planners, cleanup crew, all these things. And we often do that without question because we want to be team players. We want to serve our organization. We want to serve other departments. And we just do it willingly. And sometimes as development directors, we need to have the courage to say, you know, I want to help in certain areas, but at the same time, I have to be the best fundraiser for our organization that I can be. And as part of taking care of myself is making sure that I can do my job as effectively as possible. And that's where having those candid conversations with your leader comes into play. So the next section we're going to talk about is time management. And this is something I know every sector struggles with. This is not unique to the fundraising profession, but this is something that as development directors, we really struggle with. Where should we be spending our time? How are we spending our time? And what exactly does that look like? And I love the quote by Gary Keller: activity is often unrelated to productivity, and busyness rarely takes care of business. We want to fill every minute of our day with some level of activity. And I was in a meeting a few months ago, and someone asked the question, why do we feel like we have to be seen as busy all the time? Why is that? Why do we feel guilty, or why do we feel less than when we spend time during our day being still, reading, or just taking time to think and strategize? That no, we have to be busy. We have to look busy. And whether it's, even if it's something really, really small, activity and taking care of business is the goal. And so I love this quote because it really hits at a truth that activity is often unrelated to productivity. So I'm going to give you my time buckets that I used when I was a development director that helped me evaluate where I was spending my time and helped me ask the question, where should I be spending my time? So I created 6 time buckets for my time as a development director. Now, this is a good template. Let me say before we go through this, yours may look a little different. So I encourage you to take this, and you'll get the slides after the presentation, so you don't have to copy this right now. But I encourage you to take this and mold it to fit your specific role within your organization. And different parts of the year will require a different times in different areas. But this is a good starting point for all of you in terms of evaluating where you're spending your time. So the 6 buckets that I always tried to look at were strategy. How much time am I spending planning, brainstorming, outlining the next steps? In other words, you could say being proactive. How much time am I spending thinking about the next steps and being proactive instead of reactive? Programs and impact. It's very important for development directors to spend time getting to know your programmatic staff, the work that they're doing, and actually seeing and feeling your impact directly. If you as a development director are removed from your impact, there is no way that you can communicate that effectively to your donors. When a development director gets in there and they talk to the people that's doing the work, when they're talking to the people who are benefiting from your services, whose lives are changed because of your organization, and all that is because of what your donors are fueling and investing in, that is critical to fundraising success. So how much time am I spending getting into our work? How much time am I spending seeing the difference and feeling the difference that our organization is making? It's important that you spend time doing that. And meetings, everyone's favorite subject. How much time are we spending in meetings? Staff meetings, department meetings, committee meetings, board meetings, all the kind of meetings we have. How much time are we spending there? How much time are we spending with our donors? And I mean quality time directly, going to visit your donors in person, maybe having personal virtual meetings with your donors, or it could be indirectly, as in writing thank you notes to your donors, or you see something, a special gift that reminds you of a donor, and you act upon that and you send that to them. So how much time are we spending, quality time are we spending with our donors? We need to make sure we have time for the execution, the stuff, the emails, writing, designing stuff, all the work, all the details and the stuff that it takes to get our job done. And then this one is very, very helpful, building in response time. If you do nothing else from this presentation, other than you become more intentional building in response time for you and your team, that will make a huge difference. So I have a client who started dedicating 1 day a week for response time. 1 day a week. They don't schedule internal meetings. They don't schedule board meetings or committee meetings. They use that day to respond to and take advantage of opportunities that come up during the week. And I checked in with them, and they said that has been invaluable to their organization. Every week they have, I know this is, in this particular case, it was specifically for the development team. They dedicated 1 day a week to be responsive and take advantage of opportunities that came up during the week. And it could be a donor wanted this, a board member wanted that, a new idea that needed more research and planning. And every day, every week, they had some opportunity that they were able to take advantage of because they proactively set a day aside to do so. Now, I've never done that, but what I have done is I always set aside a couple of hours every day as a cushion. And I never knew what I was going to be doing during that cushion, but every day I had something come up that needed more time than I would have had. But because I had a cushion in each day, I was able to take advantage of that opportunity. It could have been a donor call, could have been a programmatic event that I didn't know was happening, or something that we wanted to celebrate, or something that I wanted to see or do. I was able to do that more regularly because I was proactive, building in some response time. By the way, if an opportunity doesn't present itself, is there anything wrong with having a little more cushion during your day? No, you'll never run out of things to do. So these were the 6 time buckets that I had, and I would every week for a while, I would evaluate where I'm spending my time. And once I had that information, I would be able to see, okay, I really need to be more intentional, spending more time with donors and less time in meetings. So use the time bucket strategy, make it your own, track your time so that you can see where your time is going. Ask your staff to do the same thing. Hey, we want to make sure that we use our time effectively, and we need to know where it's going. Track your time, and let's talk about, is that the best use of it for this part in the year? Another challenge that many organizations have, not just in fundraising, not just in nonprofits, is meetings. And I hear a lot of organizations with the goal to have fewer meetings. But what I have found is the goal should not be to have fewer meetings, but to have better meetings. If you have 10 meetings a week and you trim that down to 5, but you still have 5 bad meetings in your week, no one's going to be more productive, and no one's certainly going to be happier necessarily having bad meetings throughout the week. So I think the goal should not be focused on how many meetings we're having, but are we having effective meetings? How can we have better meetings? And so 3 things that I always try to do when I have a meeting is I like to have one clear objective for the meeting and a backup plan. And I know a lot of people will say, well, we have 6 things to cover, we have 5 things to cover, maybe even we have 3 things to cover, but the average meeting time is between an hour and an hour and a half. And we know, and we've all been in these meetings where we can't really hardly accomplish 3 things in a meeting, but we feel like for whatever reason, that's what we have to do. So have one objective and make sure that it's clear to the attendants in the meeting. Have one clear objective for the meeting. And in the event that you accomplish that objective quickly and efficiently, come in with a backup. Say, with our remaining time, perhaps we can discuss this or we can accomplish this secondary task. But really focus on having one clear objective. Another thing that a lot of organizations don't do well is identify who will lead the meeting. So we all get into a meeting and we kind of look around the table and we go, who called this meeting? Well, when you're in the meeting and you identify who in the moment, who's going to lead the meeting, that tells you right there, you're probably not going to have a very productive meeting because that person just learned that they're in charge. So likely they didn't come as prepared. They're not ready to facilitate. So when you have a meeting, make sure that you have a clear objective and make sure you identify who is in charge of the meeting, who's responsible for making sure that when we come to the meeting, we're prepared. They make sure who's responsible for making sure the right people are in the room, and who's going to be responsible for facilitating that discussion to make sure that you arrive at the objective, that you accomplish what you set out to accomplish. Identify and make clear who that person is, and you will find that your meetings are much more productive. And get out early. Just because you set a meeting for an hour and a half, doesn't mean you have to take the full hour and a half for the meeting. If you have one clear objective and you have one person in charge of the meeting, and you accomplish what you need to accomplish in 45 minutes instead of an hour, your next step should be get out of the meeting. You do not need to fill the last 15 minutes of the meeting with other stuff. It is perfectly fine, and your team will be happier if you find that in more of your meetings, you're getting out early and people can prepare for their next meeting or make better use of their time. Even if you have to have another meeting, if your meetings are effective and they happen in this order and they're productive and people are getting out on time or early, the culture of your meetings will change dramatically pretty quickly. But you have to be disciplined to have a clear objective, a clear person responsible, and you're going to get out when you say you're going to get out, if not before. And so this is where I would like to hear from you guys. You guys have a lot of meetings. There might be something that you have done within your organization to make your meetings more productive and efficient. So use the chat box and share. That's what this is all about. So what's something that you've done within your organization or maybe a previous organization to make your meetings more productive and efficient? And while you guys type that in, and while you guys share, let's see, Sarah says, adding agenda items to calendar invites so everyone has the info ahead of time and can be prepared. That is a very good suggestion, Sarah, adding the agenda to the calendar invite. Good, that's a pro tip right there. We've been using Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it rocks. Thank you for sharing, Jen. We're actually going to talk about that here in a few minutes, so maybe you can chime in a little later. Very clear, mission-focused, data-focused online system. Yes, Jen, I'm glad you mentioned EOS. We're going to talk about that here in a few minutes. I'm really glad that you brought that up. And again, for Sarah's suggestion, for those that may be watching after the fact and can't see the chat, adding agenda items to calendar invites so that everyone has the information ahead of time and can be prepared. That is a great tool. Calendar invite goes out. Here's what we plan to discuss. Come prepared. That is a great tip. A book that you all might be interested in if you haven't already read it. Patrick Lencioni, well-known author and speaker, has a book, Death by Meeting. You may have already read it. But I love that he says meetings are ineffective because they lack contextual structure. Once a week, twice a month, people get together for 2 or 3 hours of randomly focused discussion about everything. And I think that's the clear point in the quote is we get together. The agenda seems to be random because most people don't, we put too much in the agenda. We expect too much in too little time. And because no one is in charge of the meeting, what we talk about seems to be random, and it becomes this potluck of an agenda. We're talking about things that may or may not be on point. They may not be mission focused. It may not be data driven, and we're going to talk about everything everywhere all at once. So Death by Meeting, Patrick Lencioni, very good book. So the last section that we're going to talk about before we do a Q&A is project and data management. Peter Drucker, again, well-known author and speaker. There is nothing so useless as doing what should not be done at all. And that really speaks to the fact that we try to pack in everything and we say yes to everything. We cram our days, and we try to do everything. We really try to focus on efficiently, but nothing is as helpful as saying no and eliminating the things, even if it's just moving it from one day to another, not doing something today to allow yourself to be more focused and productive on the things that matter, not trying to do everything all at once. So here are a few project and data management tools that I have seen be very effective for organization. I know Amy Eisenstein did a fantastic webinar last week for CauseVox that talked about capital campaigns, and she touched on some of these tools. So I won't go over some of the things that she said, but Asana is a fantastic, I use Asana, and so I can personally speak to what a great tool it is just to help prioritize, triage, and schedule out tasks and make sure that everyone is staying on track and making sure that we know what the priorities are and what tasks are important but need to be pushed down a little further. ClickUp, Teamwork PM, and Trello are other good project management softwares. Now, Jen mentioned the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS. I have seen several nonprofits to some degree implement EOS within their organization, and every organization that has raves about it. And and Jen is another one that I just learned on the chat that they use EOS and they love it. I am not affiliated with EOS, and to be honest, I don't know I don't know a ton about that operating system and how it's implemented. What I do know is that it has been very effective for a lot of organizations, and every nonprofit that I've worked with that has it loves it, and it has helped them streamline and focus on the things that matter most. So maybe that could be a good tool. I know they even have books. If you don't want the entire software, the entire suite of EOS, they even have some books and resources that you can read and will help implement some of their principles into practice. So let's talk about data management. And so we, as development directors, we understand the importance of good data, but oftentimes we struggle with the software that we have, if we have any. And so what I want to do, there are a lot of good fundraising or donor management softwares out there, and they all do a number of things really well. So rather than go through what all the options are, here are the questions that I asked myself when I was a development director and we completely overhauled our data management system and went from one to another. We completely changed the software that we used. But let me tell you my thought process behind that. I thought, what does our software need to do well? And it might sound superficial for this to be on the top of the list, that it needs to be polished and have a modern interface. But it's really not superficial. We know that people are more likely to interact with things that are aesthetically pleasing and that they want to interact with. Apple figured this out way before anybody else in the computer industry. They knew that people would be more likely to buy and use their products if they made them more appealing to use physically and visually. They knew that. When Steve Jobs came back to Apple and he completely redesigned their product line, it wasn't superficial. It wasn't because he just wanted them to be pretty. He knew the value of having an interface that welcomed people in and didn't and that they didn't hate using. So when you think about a donor management software, if you don't like using it, you will not use it. And your team likely will not use it as much as they need to if they don't, to some degree, enjoy getting in there and interacting with it. It is a real thing that you need to look for in a donor software. Do you, to some degree, how much do you like interacting with it? The second thing, it needs to run reports efficiently. How easy is it to get your reports out? If you need to run a LIBUNT report, you want to find out who gave last year but hasn't given this year, who's already given this year that gave last year, all these various types of reports that your organization needs to run. Can the software run reports efficiently? And can it export information clearly? Some software can run reports, but when you export it, it's 39 columns and 32 of them you don't even need. So you spend just as much time hiding columns. So being able to run reports efficiently and export information clearly is important. Be able to create organized and useful donor profiles. Ask your software what you currently have, or if you're shopping around, what does a donor profile look like? What you need to be able to do is to find a donor in the software and easily organize their information. What is their lifetime giving? When did they make their first gift? What is the largest gift that they've made to the organization? And what do we know about them? Yeah, their contact information. What do they like giving to? Do they like to give towards a certain project? How do they give? Do they give in response to your annual appeal, a newsletter? Do they sponsor your gala? A donor profile needs to clearly and easily for you put that information together so you can see your donor and see that critical information easily and right there. So how well does a software create those donor profiles? And the last thing that I look for is they need to provide exceptional customer service, because you don't need to think about you need to think about beyond yourself. You may know how to use your donor software, but you're not going to be the last development director your organization has. Someone's going to come alongside you, someone's going to come behind you rather, and need to learn that software. So for the betterment of your organization, customer service is important now, because if you have a problem, if your team has a problem, they need to be able to get someone on the phone. I appreciate what Jenna said earlier. about CauseVox. And one reason I like CauseVox is because I know that if someone calls, they're going to get a human on the phone. And that level of customer service is important for your donor management software. And when it's time for the next development director to come into that chair and they need to learn that software, they need to be able to get on the phone or get online and talk to someone that is helpful. So customer service is important. So those are the three things. I know we've covered a lot in our time here. We talked about staff management, time management, project and data management. And one last thing that I want to share with you all before we tackle some questions here is I have a free handout for you guys that I think will spark productive conversations about where your development operations are today and uncover some ideas of how they can be improved moving forward. So you're going to get this handout in a PDF, in an email in the next couple of days. And what I encourage you to do is ask yourself these questions. And then if you have development staff, ask them these questions. So if you look at time management, for example, one of the questions is, what is one thing we could do that would help us manage our time more effectively? I guarantee you as the development director is going to have a different answer than a member of your development staff or even your executive director. And the only way to get those ideas is to ask the right questions. So you're going to get this handout, and I encourage you to use it to ask yourself these questions and spend some time really thinking about it. Don't fill it out in 5 minutes. Take an hour to go through these questions and put a lot of thought into the answers, and then ask your team members to do the same. So thank you so much, Jenna and CauseVox. Thank you for everyone that signed up to be here live today, and those that want to watch the recording and get the handouts afterwards. I appreciate your interest in operations. And before we take questions, everyone that registered will get an email from me with some of this information. And if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free. You'll have my email address, and please feel free to send me an email. So, Jenna,
Yes.
do you want to tackle some questions in the chat?
Yeah, I saw a couple. We have time for just a couple. I know Jen asked, I don't know if she's still on the call, but she asked, Kenny, do you have a suggested or preferred job description for a development director?
Yes, I do have a good starting point for a chief development officer job description. And I'm going to make a note, and I will include that in the follow-up email that goes out to everyone that registered.
Awesome. And then I think there was one from Regina. She asked, do you distinguish between development and fundraising specifically? I don't know, Regina, if you wanted to add some additional context around that.
Yes. So yeah, Regina, if you want to provide more context in the chat on that would be helpful. But I think Regina touches on something that can be confusing, is some organizations define development differently. And I think that's even more important to be clear in your job description, whether you're giving the job description to someone else that you're hiring, or if you're reviewing your own job description, making sure that you're clear about the terminology that you use is really important. Because what I know organizations that use development as a broad term that can mean resource development and other sorts of development, whereas some nonprofits will use development specifically for fundraising. And so now most people I do find use development and fundraising interchangeably. So typically when I present and I say development, I'm specifically referring to fundraising.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Okay, well, how about one more question? We have one more minute. Take advantage of Kenny while he's here. But this has been jam-packed with so much, just really practical adjustments that can start to be made within your organization. And I'm really encouraged and inspired by a lot of the insight that Kenny shared today. So hopefully you are all too.
Let's see,
Okay.
Regina says, in my organization, our development director writes grants and work and government grants. The fundraiser handles events and individual donors. Does that make sense? It does make sense. And that's pretty common that someone in development you'll have one person really writing grants. And that could be foundation grants, corporate grants, and state federal grants. And then you have someone else who's really focused on the personal donor relationship side of fundraising. So that is common. And Sandy says, do you distinguish between online and traditional fundraising? Do you distinguish between the two? I distinguish between the two in that the goal of the fundraising team is to obviously raise money, but here's something, Sandy, to help answer that question. We know the data tells us, nationally speaking, that more money is being raised. So when you look at the Giving USA report, you'll see that charitable giving is increasing year over year, right? But what you may not see is that fewer people are giving to charities. Okay, so what's happening is a lot of nonprofits are seeing more money coming in from fewer donors. Another way of saying that is fewer donors are accounting for more money coming into an organization. So for Sandy, I distinguish that in the fact that a lot of the relationship building that's needed for organization to raise the money that they need to raise is very difficult to do online. Online is great for crowdfunding campaigns, to get more people involved, to identify new people to get to know. It is different because as fewer donors account for more dollars within an organization, that's really difficult to do online. So the more traditional style of fundraising, now more than ever, has to be very personal and have unique strategies for all of your major donors. If you only do online fundraising, chances are it's going to be very difficult to move donors up in the giving pyramid. If it's only done online, an ideal thing is to have online giving to identify donors, bring people in, and then you have people that can identify and build those relationships so that you move donors up the pyramid.
Yeah, perfectly put. Great questions today too, from everyone. This has been so fruitful for me, just learning more and more about organizational, just the day-to-day operations. So I'm going to just leave us with some contact information for Kenny. If you want to email him, and drop in a couple other links as well. So if you're interested in learning more about how CauseVox could serve your needs, like if you're looking for a donation form or fundraising campaign sites, anything like that, you can book a demo. We can discuss more about how CauseVox can serve you. You can also subscribe to our blog, which I had mentioned earlier. And let's see, if you have any additional questions outside of that, you can always reach out to our support and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. But again, thank you so much for today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. We'll talk soon.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.